Welcome to Business Reporter's Best of British Business campaign. Healthcare systems are under pressure. Demand is rising, budgets are tight, new treatments are becoming more complex and more expensive. Everyday healthcare decision makers are facing a difficult question. What is the true value of a new drug, treatment, or clinical practice? Today's guest argues that the answer requires more than clinical data and cost figures. It requires a deep understanding of how decisions play out across real populations over time. I'm joined by Phil McEwen, CEO of HEOR, a leading British research consultancy that helps healthcare organisations worldwide understand the real systemic impact of medical innovation. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why is it so difficult to define value in healthcare?
I think the key challenge is that there isn't one unifying definition of what value is. It really depends on who you're speaking to, what they're measuring, and what they consider the valid outcome to be. You've got payers focusing on ultimately managing the pharmacy budgets. We've got clinicians looking to manage outcomes, and you've got patients who sometimes are unaware of some of the idiosyncrasies around the drugs and what they do and how important it is to adhere to them and so on. So there's a real degree of complexity. And an intervention and a decision point invariably gets looked at in isolation. And so people don't see that whole spectrum of consequences associated with the decision making that's going on now. And it's that feature that makes it truly unique.
So amid all of that complexity, what can decision makers do to ensure that they're making solid, evidence-based decisions?
They need to understand the full picture rather than looking at the decision within a narrow framework. An appreciation of how the decisions that are made in various parts of the system interact with each other and play out in the future, I think, is the responsibility of all those decision makers within healthcare. And I think the information to do that exists. And I think the important thing is that's how you make truly informed decisions. And until they do that, I think they'll be making decisions that are potentially suboptimal.
So tell us a bit more about HEOR. Where do you fit in and how do you help those decision makers?
Well, I mentioned a moment ago that they need the full picture in order to be able to understand the true value of innovation, and that's exactly what we do. It's about taking the existing evidence and methodology that's applied and presenting that within that broader context of how it all fits together. How does a changing, evolving population matter and impact the way in which healthcare is delivered, not only now but in the future? And what is the consequence of introducing a new drug into that system? Where are those considerations? And what we do at HEOR is, in addition to assessing the value for money of new interventions in the conventional way, it's also about presenting it within that system-wide context.
And how do you do that so that you've got then valuable insights for your clients?
If we look at the services from the component parts, we do a lot of data science, so the analysis of clinical trials and real-world databases, and we bring that information together to develop communication tools as well as mathematical models in order to be able to understand how the natural history of disease is likely to progress in the future, taking into consideration population dynamics as well as the healthcare system's ability to be able to manage those populations and patients. But we also take into consideration the environmental impact, the impact on society, the ability of people to be able to work. But the key thing is bringing that information together. So ultimately we're projecting into the future what we think will happen using the best available scientific techniques, methodology and data available to us at the moment.
Okay, let's talk about that in action. So can you give me an idea of what a project looks like from beginning to end and maybe give us some examples?
Sure. Well, perhaps starting with the example, if we think about weight loss It's a complex disease because it's related to so many other features. So it's related to cardiovascular disease, to kidney disease, to diabetes, to hypertension. And so it's not a straightforward disease, but the consequences are complex. And so understanding how those different diseases fit together and how they're evolving within a population is the first thing that we'll do. How the treatment landscape is likely to change over time, the role for surgery, the role for interventions such as GLP-1s, the role of diet and exercise. Those are all factors that we describe using information from the literature and bring it together in order to be able to understand how the world is likely going to have to manage this evolving problem. And it's only through understanding that you can then begin to truly understand the value of doing something differently in the future.
Can you give me an example of a product or treatment where the value wasn't obvious at first sight?
But let's stick with obesity that we've been discussing. If someone needs knee surgery, but they're not eligible because they're too heavy, then the weight loss intervention may actually be a bridge to being able to get the surgery that they actually need. I think another example is that of antimicrobial resistance, which is a key concern to the World Health Organization because there are increasing numbers of infections that are resistant to the antibiotics that we have available to us. To bring an antibiotic to market, you invariably will have a clinical trial evidence that shows the antibiotic is at least as good as what is currently available, but at a higher price premium because it's cost an awful lot of money to develop that antibiotic. So something that's more expensive that does the same. So from a value for money perspective, it doesn't stack up. But the true value of an antibiotic is wrapped up in its lack of resistance in clinical practice. And so that's nothing to do with the technology itself, but it's everything to do with having an effective technology at your disposal should you need it. And that doesn't figure at all in the conventional way of evaluating a drug.
You're in a rapidly changing environment in the healthcare sector. What are some of the trends that you're looking at and you're seeing at the moment?
There are a huge number of truly innovative biotechs that are becoming available. Cell and gene therapy is tremendous. The potential for truly individualized medicines is extraordinary. The ability to delay or avoid whole diseases is really on the cards, but it requires robust decision making. And of course, what healthcare systems really need to address is an understanding of how you optimize outcomes across the system. And until we do that, it doesn't really matter what the technology is, whether it's a drug or whether it's AI, it's going to struggle to make any material impact. In order to get the outcomes that the country needs, any country, you need to understand what is the possible outcome that we're trying to achieve, and then assess value within the context of a population that is dynamic, a therapy landscape that's dynamic and truly international. So it's that recognition of the coordination across those system-wide constraints is hugely important.
Phil McEwen, CEO of HEOR, thank you very much. That was Phil McEwen, CEO of HEOR.